So we have really unique things about our product. But the big thing we try to do is focus on vertical integration. We're one of the only companies doing and telling the story behind the product.
And I want a good show, damn it. Ready for a good show?
Doing awesome, yeah. I'm excited to talk to you, Angie. Thank you for having me.
Yes!
I've always been doing big into archery, and my dad said, hey, you guys want to start an archery store?
That's how it is.
Andrew, yes, of course, let's do this together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Show. As usual, I am your host, Andrew Maff, and today I'm joined by the amazing Blake Shook, who is the CEO over at Desert Creek Honey. Blake, how you doing, buddy? You ready for a good show?
Wonderful, Andrew. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here.
Yeah. I am so excited to have you on the show. So I always have like my little notes, and you have so much going on that I'm going to have to read this. So you've got obviously Desert Creek Honey. You also have a bulk bee supply company, which is Desert Creek Bulk Bees. You have a honey packing company called Desert Creek Honey, of course, a chain of hobby beekeeping stores, the Bee Supply, and a commercial bee supply store, Commercial Bee Supply, and a pollination company, which is Desert Creek Pollination. How are you taking the time to do this podcast right now? Like, dear God, man, that is nuts.
5 minutes late, so
I'm shocked you did this at all. So tell me, like, I always start this off relatively stereotypically, which means I'm sure we're going to get all the insight from you. So why don't you tell me a little bit about, your background, how you got started with this, and just tell me all about it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, it was a happy accident. I mean, the origin story is I always loved entrepreneurship. I loved the outdoors. I loved, anything entrepreneurship, even from, I was 8 years old writing business plans. And when I was about 12, I had really gotten into chicken farming, of all things, as a kid.
Okay.
I got in the country, convinced my parents I was going to build this farm to table chicken egg company in their backyard. And so I had some stores lined up to carry our egg products. And I convinced them I'm going to do this in your backyard. And I think they believed me. And so they were like, we've got to get this kid on anything else other than this, because that's the last thing we want in our backyard. So at 12, they signed me up for sports and all sorts of other hobbies, activities, trying to divert my interest. And one of the things they signed me up for was a beekeeping scholarship, where this, 3% of beekeepers are under 40 years old. So it's a dying industry, right? Yeah. So this club was trying to get kids involved. They signed me up and I won it. I won a free beehive class, totally fell in love with beekeeping. Absolutely fell in love. It's just a fascinating hobby. So got one beehive, got two beehives, got 10 beehives. Started going to local grocery stores. We were one of the first food products on Amazon. And all of a sudden realized halfway through high school, maybe I can make a living at this, and really started building a business. And so started scaling it. And by the time I graduated high school, moved into it full-time, had a full-time business. We were in several grocery stores and never really looked back. Started diversifying about 10 years ago, really started diversifying into all those other businesses. Got on a reality TV show, and that kind of helped build our brand, but those details for later in the show.
Beautiful. That's nuts. So one of the things I wanted to ask about, obviously, since I brought up the 15 different elements of the business, tell me a little bit about the different elements here. Cause it's not just honey. It's also a pollination, and it's bee supply, and then the hobby side, like there's a ton of different stuff. So tell me a little bit about each of those entities.
Yeah, the simplest way to summarize it is that we're the only company in our industry that really can that really does everything. So we're 100% vertically integrated. So we kind of took that to an extreme. Not only do we produce honey, package it, and sell it to grocery stores, we also produce the woodenware that the bees live in. We produce the woodenware, we sell it to other people, we supply ourselves, we raise our own honeybees and sell honeybees to other people. We pollinate crops, we produce honey, we take that honey all the way to the consumer through e-commerce directly, and then through brick-and-mortar stores, indirectly. And so really, any aspect of honey, the beekeeping industry, we have a company that does that. And so there's really nothing that we don't do and don't touch within this industry.
Owning the entire kind of like supply chain and customer life cycle like that is just unheard of. So what kind of gave you the idea to not only do that, but what also like, what's going on in your head? Because that just sounds like so much like, no, I don't know any other brand that's just like, oh, we should also be the manufacturer and the supplier. And like, what was that process like?
It's a good question. So I think my team asks that all the time. What on earth is but it's really, there's a couple elements, and one is a love for entrepreneurism and entrepreneurship. And I think that it's a bit of an addiction. Anyone that's an entrepreneur knows that it's addicting. But so I think that's an element of it. But I think that it's a relatively small industry that I'm playing in. And so, it's a, couple $1 billion industry. It's not a $100 billion industry. And so it's within reach to own the supply chain and to really try to be a significant force within that industry in one generation. That's within reach. And so I think that was part of the attraction is, this is an aging industry. This is an industry that hasn't been shaken up in a long time. Lots of industries and food categories like that out there for sure. And so we really see an opening to come in, shake it up, and take our fair, maybe an unfair size of the market in a very short period of time.
Wow. Tell me about the honey in itself. Like and I mean this in the nicest way, and I always try to caveat this when I'm talking to brands, like it's honey, right? Like differentiating yourself is very difficult. So how did you manage to get it into a position where you're doing as well as you are?
Yeah, and Andrew, that's such a great question because it is a commodity, and it's like trying to sell a tomato, right? A tomato, and how do you set that apart? And honey is tricky because it borders the line of just a straight commodity, but then maybe like a sauce or a spread. It's adjacent to those. But at the end of the day, there are some things we can do, like how we process it is special. It preserves more of the nutrients than most honey. The locale is special. It's not imported from other countries. The U.S. consumes 600 million pounds of honey a year. The U.S. only produces 120 million pounds a year. So the vast majority of honey consumed is imported. We don't do that. So we have really unique things about our product. But the big thing we try to do is focus on that vertical integration that we're one of the only companies doing and telling the story behind the product. And that's something that, for example, private label grocers can't do. They can't put a face on the label. They can't tell a story. Mm-hmm. They can't tell that origin story. They can't give you a behind the scenes look at here's how we do this. Let's just open up the curtain, look behind the curtain at here's how we process it. Here's how we raise the honeybees. Here's Joe from production and what he did today. So that's kind of been our niche is education, and then giving an insider look at how everything's done.
From I know there's so many different elements to the business between like we talked about the hobby side and the commercial side and all that stuff, but from the honey in itself, what is your top sales channel? Is it retail or is it some level of e-commerce?
In profit or in revenue?
That's always the best follow-up question.
Yeah.
You pick.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to beat the revenue of some of the big e-commerce players. They're just such volume drivers. and we're there because our customers expect us to be. But as you know, probably far better than I do, it is tough to make a profit on e-commerce with a low margin item like food, especially one that's heavy. Our product is heavy, and that is tough. So lots of revenue. Amazon and Walmart.com are certainly the mammoths that we play in. Our best profit driver is brick-and-mortar. The Walmarts, the H-E-Bs of the world are hard to beat from a profit perspective.
From an e-commerce perspective, it being the revenue driver, but not exactly the profit margin, makes sense. What's the CPG side? I know is always a struggle, right? Because even if it's a commodity, even if it's not, it could be wildly differentiated. It's still one of those things where the big hurdle is getting someone to try it, right? And then once they try it and then they understand the story, it's a little bit easier to kind of keep them coming back. Not as challenging on a retail side because sometimes you can have like samples and things like that, but you can't really do that on e-commerce. So what's your approach in kind of getting over that hurdle?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we've pretty much tried it all. And our most successful attempts have really been running sales, getting the buy box, and making sure our reviews are fantastic, and then doing targeted ad spend. And we've tried everything over the years to make that cost efficient, and there's some tools that have come onto the market in the last few years that have been helpful. But it's a constant battle of getting people to try it, building that brand loyalty when you can't hand them a sample. So we've found you've got to have a fantastic profile that catches them the first time. You've got to have all the talking points that they want to see. You've got to have that hook. You got to have great images. And then we really talk about, we're shifting more and more to talking about the taste, where a lot of our competitors don't do that. So we're trying to, that's one of our strategies. Don't tell anybody. For shifting into 2025 is really digging into the taste and describing that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to beat the ads ultimately, especially if you're talking on an Amazon. I mean, you've got to.
Oh yeah. Is from an e-commerce perspective, obviously you mentioned Amazon being one of the mammoths. What about your own site? How much do you kind of focus on getting as much revenue as you can through that channel?
Yeah, so a fair amount actually. I mean, it's been a great. I mean, we get lots of great data from our website and the customers there, but we have a little more of an opportunity to tell our story, to build that brand loyalty, to help those customers connect with us, and then we can reach back out to them in a more direct way. And so we do try pretty hard. We find a lot of people will buy on our website, and then eventually will transition to one of the other e-commerce players, which we're
really,
which is okay. But that website is often their first introduction, and so we do a lot of Google ads and the various things to drive people to our website. And so, yeah, we focus on it quite a bit. Again, not a huge revenue driver, but a great introduction to us as a company and a great way to build brand loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that the kind of omni-channel element for CPG always comes into play, where you could be spending an arm and a leg driving traffic to your website, and then maybe you acquire them, great, but then they tend to hop over to Amazon eventually or something like that. Although I will say, we do often hear the opposite, right? Like I find Amazon's a great customer acquisition channel, but then after a while, you've got to find a way to get them back to the site. So you're actually seeing them do the opposite, where they're starting your site and then going to Amazon?
We do see that. And to be fair, we do see it both ways. If someone's frustrated by elements of other e-commerce players, then they'll come to us for a more white glove customer service experience. So we certainly do see that. But we see it the other way too. People try it on our website, they like it, but then they like the convenience of the other e-commerce players. It's just so easy to buy it in. And I do think, price point is a factor there. We find customers that find us first on our website and then go, oh, I didn't realize you were on Amazon or Walmart.com or, Kroger's marketplace. I get there, I buy their stuff anyway, so I'll just start buying it there. So that we do see it both ways. And we're not a specialty product. We're more of an everyday item.
How do you decipher like a marketing budget knowing that there's that kind of bleed over? Like, to your point, I know there's a bunch of different platforms now where you can kind of judge attribution, but they're not integrating with, Amazon or someone going to Walmart or someone going to retail. So how do you decipher your marketing budget when you have that much of a bleed over to not only other e-commerce stores, but brick and mortar as well?
It's really hard. And, I've asked that same question of executives of all scales of companies in the food industry. And I'm always shocked at the responses of, that's a good question. We're just going to pick a number, this is what we can fit into our budget. And it's really hard. And how effective is your e-commerce advertising? What's your ROI on it? And we have some tools now that are helping answer that. Mm-hmm. But my goodness, I mean, some of the biggest food companies in the world, I've asked their VPs of marketing, e-commerce marketing, how are you doing this? And it's like, it's a good question. So my answer is, we try to look at it holistically. We look at as a company, what results are we trying to drive this year? Are we trying to, what growth rate are we looking for on our e-commerce channels, or growth rate are we looking for on our brick and mortar channels? We tend to start with brick and mortar first. So if we want to achieve these growth goals in brick and mortar, what dollars do we need to support that growth? And then we start there because that's where most of our profit is. And then with what remains of our budget, we say, okay, how can we most effectively spread that out amongst all the e-commerce players to drive the greatest results? And then it's all about just optimize, A/B testing, until we find that point of diminishing return, because it's always there. And so we're pretty quick to experiment, and we'll throw $10,000 at something to see where we hit that point of diminished return, and so that it more accurately shows us the dollar amount we should be spending on certain campaigns.
So in your scenario, that makes a ton of sense, but there's also other elements to this, right? So like, let's take kind of your standard e-commerce company. They're tracking everything they're on like a couple channels. Great, easy enough. Everything is easily trackable. Then you start to diversify. You're doing more omni-channel elements. Now you've got to kind of do that finessing like you're talking about, where you're looking at how do I come up with, a marketing budget, et cetera, when I can't track everything. In your scenario, you also own the entire kind of chain. So do you look at them as individual companies, or do you look at it all as one holistic kind of life cycle? In which case, like, for example, if let's say the packing company was doing really well, or the pollination company was doing really well, do you kind of recalculate those profits back into a different part of the business, or do you keep them kind of more siloed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So they're becoming more and more of one company. I mean, typically profits roll up to the parent company, and then, then we decide where to push those profits back down. Where do we want to invest more or less? And what business unit do we want to reinvest those dollars? So it is looking at it pretty holistically. Some business units are more cash cows, but the growth ceiling is low. And so we're going to probably reinvest a little less there. Others, we feel like maybe they're not generating much revenue or much of a profit. Retail food brand's a great example. But we feel like there's an incredibly high ceiling. And so that's where we would invest more of those profits. So it's more of a holistic look.
So it's so interesting, because most brands don't have that benefit, right? Like they don't have the control of what their COGS are. You control your own COGS, and then you work it back up, which puts you in such a great position. And then you also have these kind of additional arms of like, hobbyists and basically like the fulfillment side and all of that that becomes very interesting, which means that you must be nothing short of a genius to be able to manage some of that stuff.
Well, I have people working for me that are genius.
Well, yeah, exactly. But you thought of it, so you get the credit, and I'm talking to you right now, so I'll give you the credit, and then let your team know they're crushed. What's the goal? Where do you take it from here? Like, you mentioned in the beginning, you got the entrepreneurial bug, you just are obsessed with it. So sometimes that means you start venturing into other areas, or you thinking you just want to keep growing Desert Honey just completely. Like, what's the next steps for you?
Yeah, great question. So we have big plans still in the beekeeping world. We've got really big plans, but most of your listeners are, e-commerce focused and food brand focused. So I assume, so on that front, we feel like there is still an incredible market opportunity for really growing our food retail brand. So that we feel like we've just scratched the surface there, and we are very interested in branching into honey adjacent products. Honey has an incredible health halo, as we call it. It's perceived as a very healthy sweetener, and it's better for you than sugar, and it's better for you than other sweeteners. And so, when you get into honey adjacent products where honey is kind of the key ingredient or the star, there's a big demand there, and there's a lot of momentum there as well. And so we're leveraging our customer base that trusts us and knows our history and trusts our product into other products that are we're calling them honey adjacent. And so we see a lot of potential there, and we think the market is still very ripe for simple ingredient lists for products that are easy to understand, that have completely transparent processing and ingredient. And so we have pretty big plans there on e-commerce and brick and mortar. On e-commerce, we are really for the first time crafting products specifically for e-commerce, where this is a product that will live on e-commerce. So the packaging, the weight, the dimensions, the price point is all designed to win on e-commerce. Probably wouldn't work at all in brick and mortar. But we feel like that's the winning game plan for e-commerce. Not taking a 3-pound jug of honey and try to win on shipping that thing across the country. That's just not going to win, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But a 4-ounce tube of propolis face cream for $49, that's a winning product.
Yeah. Very interesting. And it makes a ton of sense, right? It's very similar to adjusting your marketing based on your audience. You're also adjusting your product line based on the audience you're targeting.
Exactly.
So awesome. Blake, this was awesome. I really appreciate all your time. I know you are wildly busy with all the different stuff you have going on. So I really appreciate it. I would love to give you the opportunity, let everyone know where they can find out more about you and, of course, more about Desert Honey.
Absolutely. I mean, the best thing to do is check out our websites. If you go to desertcreekhoney.com, if you're interested in getting into beekeeping, you go to thebeesupply.com, and we'd love to help get you started. And or you can check us out on our YouTube channels or any social media channels.
Love it. Blake, thank you so much for being on the show. Obviously, everyone that tuned in, thank you as well. Please make sure you do the usual: rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff on whichever podcast platform you prefer, or head over to the ecommshow.com to check out all of our previous episodes. But as usual, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ecomm Show. Head over to ecommshow.com to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the BlueTuskr YouTube channel. The Ecomm Show is brought to you by BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company specifically for e-commerce sellers looking to accelerate their growth. Go to BlueTuskr.com now for more information. Make sure to tune in next week for another amazing episode of the Ecomm Show.